The Texas frontier of 1858 was no place for the faint of heart. Tensions between settlers and Native American tribes had reached a breaking point, with violence erupting across the plains like summer lightning. But amidst this chaos, some stories defied the boundaries of hatred and fear. This is the remarkable tale of Sarah Blackwood, a young widow whose act of compassion toward a wounded Comanche boy would not only change her life forever, but challenge everything the frontier settlers believed about their indigenous neighbors. When 60 Comanche warriors appeared at her homestead at dawn 3 days later, Sarah was certain she would die. What happened instead would become a legend that echoed through the hills of Texas for generations. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The summer of 1858 brought relentless heat to the Texas frontier. For 3 months, the sun had baked the rolling hills surrounding the modest settlement of Clearwater Springs until the grass crackled underfoot and creeks shrank to muddy trickles. The drought had everyone on edge, especially Sarah Blackwood. At 26, Sarah had already endured more hardship than most people face in a lifetime. Her husband Thomas had died the previous winter from pneumonia, leaving her alone to manage their small homestead and raise their daughter Emma, now 6 years old. They lived in a sturdy log cabin that Thomas had built with his own hands, situated on 40 acres of land about 2 miles from the Clearwater Springs settlement. Sarah stood on her porch, wiping sweat from her brow as she surveyed the withering cornfield. The crop wouldn't yield much this year, but perhaps it would be enough to get them through another winter if they were careful. Emma sat nearby, humming to herself as she mended a doll's dress with clumsy but determined stitches. "Mama, can I go down to the creek later?" Emma asked, her blue eyes hopeful. "Maybe there's still enough water for the minnows." Sarah smiled at her daughter, whose blonde braids had come half undone in the heat. "We'll see, sweetheart. First, we need to finish bringing in the laundry and check on the chickens." The isolation didn't bother Sarah most days. She'd grown up in these parts and knew how to be self-reliant. Her nearest neighbor, the Millers, lived about a mile away, and they checked in on each other when possible. The settlement of Clearwater Springs was small, just a general store, a smithy, a church, and about 20 families scattered around the area. But it was a tight-knit community born of necessity and shared hardship. As Sarah turned to go back, inside, a movement at the edge of the tree line caught her eye. She froze, her heart quickening. Living on the frontier meant always being alert to danger, and the recent uptick in Comanche raids had everyone in the territory on edge. The territorial governor had dispatched more Texas Rangers to patrol the area, but they couldn't be everywhere at once. "Emma, go inside now," Sarah said quietly but firmly. Emma knew better than to argue when her mother used that tone. She gathered her doll and sewing and scurried into the cabin. Sarah reached inside the doorway and grabbed Thomas's rifle, which she kept loaded. Though Thomas had taught her to shoot years ago, she prayed she wouldn't have to use it. She squinted against the harsh sunlight, trying to make out what she'd seen. Was it a deer, a drifter, or something more dangerous? The movement came again, and this time Sarah could see it was a person, a small person, staggering out from the trees. Keeping the rifle ready, Sarah cautiously descended the porch steps. As the figure moved into the clearing, she could see. It was a boy, perhaps 12 or 13 years old. His dark hair hung in 2 long braids, and he wore buckskin leggings and a breechcloth. His chest was bare except for a necklace of bear claws. A Comanche boy, alone and far from his people. And he was wounded. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the dark stain spreading across his side. He took 2 more faltering steps toward the cabin, then collapsed onto the parched grass. Sarah hesitated only a moment, though every instinct screamed about the danger, both from the boy himself and from what his presence might bring, she couldn't just let a child die, regardless of his origins. She propped the rifle against the porch and hurried toward him. Up close, the boy's condition was worse than she'd thought. A deep gash ran along his ribs, still seeping blood. His breathing was shallow, his skin hot with fever. He was unconscious, but moaned softly when Sarah touched his shoulder. "Emma!" Sarah called. "Bring me the clean sheets from the line and my medicine bag." Emma appeared on the porch, her eyes wide with fear when she saw the boy. "Mama, I know who he is," Sarah said firmly, "but he's hurt and we're going to help him. Now please do as I say." As Emma ran to fetch the supplies, Sarah wondered what circumstances had brought this boy to her homestead. Where was his family? Why was he alone and injured? The Comanche rarely traveled alone, especially their children. Emma returned with an armful of sheets and Sarah's medicine bag, a leather satchel containing herbs, tinctures, bandages, and other remedies Sarah had learned to prepare from her mother and grandmother. Both had been known as healers in their communities. "What should I do?" Emma asked, her voice small but determined. "Spread one of those sheets here on the ground," Sarah instructed. "We'll move him onto it, then carry him to the shed. We can't bring him into the house." The decision pained Sarah, but she knew it was necessary. If anyone from the settlement discovered she was harboring a Comanche boy, even a child, there would be severe consequences. The shed was clean and weather-tight, with a small window for ventilation. It would have to do. Together, they managed to shift the boy onto the sheet. He was light for his age, all lean muscle and bone. As they lifted the corners of the sheet to carry him, his eyes flickered open, dark, pain-filled eyes that instantly filled with fear and confusion upon seeing Sarah and Emma. He tried to struggle, but was too weak to put up much resistance. "It's all right," Sarah said softly, though she knew he probably didn't understand English. "We're trying to help you." They carried him to the shed and laid him on a pallet of clean straw covered with another sheet. Emma brought water, while Sarah examined the wound more closely. It was a knife wound, deep and potentially fatal if infection set in, which it likely already had, judging by the red streaks beginning to spread from the gash. Sarah set to work, cleaning the wound with boiled water and a tincture of yarrow to stop the bleeding. The boy drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes watching her with wary eyes, sometimes thrashing in delirium. When Sarah applied a poultice of crushed echinacea and comfrey leaves to draw out the infection, he cried out in a language she didn't understand. "Emma, go to the house and fetch some broth from the pot on the stove," Sarah said, "and bring the willow bark tea I made this morning." As Emma hurried off, Sarah spoke quietly to the boy, not knowing if he understood, but hoping her tone would comfort him. "I don't know what happened to you or how you came to be here, but you're safe now. I'm going to do everything I can to help you heal." The boy's eyes fixed on her face, studying her intensely. Then, to Sarah's surprise, he spoke a single word in heavily accented English. "Why?" Sarah hadn't expected him to know any English at all. "Because you need help," she replied simply, "and because it's the right thing to do." He seemed to consider. This then closed his eyes again, either accepting her answer or too exhausted to question further. Emma returned with a small pot of broth and a cup of tea. With Sarah's help, they managed to get the boy to swallow a few spoonfuls of broth and some of the tea, which would help with the fever and pain. "What's his name, Mama?" Emma asked. "I don't know, sweetheart. We'll have to wait until he's strong enough to tell us if he wants to." "What are we going to call him until then?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Why don't we just call him Boy for now, unless you have a better idea?" Emma frowned thoughtfully, then shook her head. "No, I guess that's okay for now." They spent the rest of the day tending to the boy, changing his poultice, getting him to drink more tea and broth when possible, and cooling his fever with damp cloths. By nightfall, Sarah was cautiously optimistic. His fever hadn't broken, but it hadn't risen either, and the bleeding had stopped entirely. Emma, we need to talk about something important, Sarah said as they walked back to the cabin in the gathering dusk. No one can know that boy is here, not the Millers, not anyone from town. Do you understand? Emma nodded solemnly. Because people don't like the Comanches. That's right. There's been a lot of fighting and hurt on both sides. If people knew we were helping him, they might be very angry. But he's just a boy like me, Emma protested. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. I know, sweetheart. That's why we're helping him. But not everyone would see it that way. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah returned to the shed to check on the boy. He was awake, his dark eyes tracking her movements as she lit a small lantern. More water, she offered, and was pleased when he nodded. As she helped him drink, he suddenly gripped her wrist with surprising strength. Takwani, he said. Sarah wasn't sure if this was his name or if he was telling her something else. Takwani, she repeated cautiously. He nodded, then touched his chest. Takwani. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I'm Sarah, she responded, placing a hand over her heart. Sarah Blackwood. The boy, Takwani, relaxed, his grip, but continued to watch her warily. He was obviously still confused about why this white woman was helping him. Your wound is deep, Sarah said, knowing he might not understand most of what she said, but feeling the need to explain anyway. You need to rest and heal. You're safe here. For a moment, something like scorn flashed across his young face, as if the idea of being safe with white settlers was ridiculous. Then the expression faded, replaced by exhaustion as he closed his eyes again. Sarah changed his poultice once more, noting with relief that the angry red streaks hadn't spread further. Maybe the infection was subsiding. She left fresh water within his reach and returned to the cabin. The next morning brought a new challenge. Jake Miller, their nearest neighbor, rode up to the cabin just as Sarah was feeding the chickens. "Morning, Sarah," he called, tipping his hat. Jake was a decent man in his 40s, who had always been kind to Sarah and Emma, especially after Thomas died. "Thought I'd check in on you two. Heard some rumors in town yesterday that got me concerned." Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "Oh, what kind of rumors?" Ranger Johnson said they found signs of a Comanche war party about 20 miles west of here. Said they might be heading this way. Jake dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post. "Just wanted to make sure you had enough ammunition for that rifle of yours." Sarah nodded. "We're fine, Jake. Thomas always kept a good supply." Jake glanced around the homestead, his expression growing more serious. "Look, Sarah, I know you're capable, but if there's trouble, you get Emma and you come straight to our place, you hear? Or better yet, maybe you two should stay with us for a few days until the rangers clear the area." "That's kind of you, Jake. But we'll be fine here," Sarah said firmly. "This is our home. I'm not about to abandon it because of rumors." Jake looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. "All right, but the offer stands. Martha would be pleased to have the company, especially Emma's." They chatted for a few more minutes about the drought and the poor crops before Jake mounted up to leave. Just as he was about to ride off, Emma came running out of the cabin. "Mr. Miller, Mr. Miller, can you tell me a story about the Rangers next time you visit?" she called. Jake chuckled. "Sure thing, little lady. You be good for your mama now." As he rode away, Sarah released the breath she'd been holding. Had Emma almost slipped? Or was she just being her usual friendly self? Either way, they needed to be more careful. "Emma, come help me gather some herbs from the garden," Sarah said, leading her daughter toward the small patch of land where she grew medicinal plants. Once they were out of earshot of the shed, she knelt down to Emma's level. "That was close. We need to be very careful about what we say and do while Takwani is here." "Takwani? Is that his name?" Emma's eyes lit up. "I think so. He told me last night, but remember, we can't tell anyone he's here." Emma nodded seriously. "I know, Mama. I won't tell. They spent the morning tending to their usual chores with Sarah, checking on Takwani whenever she could do so without drawing attention. His fever had broken during the night, and he was more alert, though still very weak. He accepted water and broth from Sarah without protest, but remained mostly silent. By the afternoon of the second day, Takwani's condition had improved significantly. The infection was receding, and he was able to sit up with support. Sarah had given him some of Thomas's old clothes, a shirt cut down to size, and a pair of trousers that were too short, but would serve until his own clothes could be cleaned and mended. Emma, bursting with curiosity, finally convinced Sarah to let her properly meet the boy. Under Sarah's watchful eye, Emma approached Takwani cautiously. "Hello," she said shyly. "I'm Emma." Takwani stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once in acknowledgement. "Mama says your name is Takwani. That's a nice name," Emma continued, undeterred by his silence. "I helped Mama make the medicine for your cut. Does it feel better now?" To Sarah's surprise, Takwani responded, "Yes, better." His English was limited, but clearly understandable. "Where did you learn English?" Sarah asked. Takwani's expression grew guarded. "Mission school, 2 summers. Then I escaped." Sarah had heard about these schools, where native children were taken, often forcibly, to be civilized. The thought made her stomach turn. No wonder he had been so wary of their help. "Your family?" Sarah asked gently. "Are they looking for you?" Takwani's face hardened. "Father is war chief, brothers too, fighting rangers." He pointed west, then made a slashing motion across his side. "Ranger knife. I ran, got lost." The pieces fell into place for Sarah. The boy had been part of a raiding party, or at least traveling with one, had been wounded in a skirmish with the Texas Rangers, and had somehow become separated from his people while fleeing. He must have wandered for miles before collapsing near her property. "How old are you?" Sarah asked. 13 winters, Takwani replied. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Why do you help the enemy?" The directness of the question caught Sarah off. "God! You're not my enemy," she said after a moment. "You're a child who was hurt and needed help." Takwani studied her face, seeming to search for deception. "White woman with a good heart," he finally said. "Rare." Sarah wasn't sure whether to be flattered or offended by his assessment. "There are good and bad people among both our peoples," she said carefully. Later that evening, after Emma was asleep, Sarah returned to the shed with fresh bandages and more food. Takwani was sitting up on his own, looking stronger by the hour. "You should be able to travel soon," Sarah said, as she changed his bandage. The wound was healing well, the infection nearly gone. "Do you know how to find your people?" Takwani nodded. "Follow the sun. 2 days' walk." Sarah frowned. "You're not strong enough to walk that far yet, and it's dangerous for you to travel alone." "Must go," Takwani insisted. "Father will think I dead, will be very angry." There was genuine concern in his voice, not for himself, Sarah realized, but for what his father might do in his grief and rage. "1 more day," Sarah negotiated. "Rest 1 more day, then I'll give you food and water for your journey." Takwani considered this, then nodded in agreement. 1 day? On the morning of the 3rd day, Takwani was up before dawn, clearly eager to depart. Sarah had packed a small bag with dried meat, corn cakes, and a water skin. She'd also mended his buckskin clothing as best she could. "The Rangers are still patrolling," Sarah warned him. "You'll need to be careful." Takwani nodded grimly. "I am silent like a fox." Emma had insisted on saying goodbye, despite Sarah's concerns about her becoming too attached to the boy. To Sarah's surprise, Takwani allowed Emma to approach him and even bent down slightly when she held out a small, carved wooden horse. "This is for you," Emma said. "My papa made it for me, but I want you to have it so you remember us." Takwani accepted the gift solemnly. "I will remember," he promised. Then, to Sarah's astonishment, he removed one of the bear claws from his necklace and handed it to Emma. For protection, Emma beamed, clutching the gift tightly. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat at the unexpected gesture. As the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon, Sarah walked Takwani to the edge of the property. "Be safe," she said simply. Takwani looked at her with those serious, dark eyes. "White woman saved Takwani, Takwani not forget." Then he turned and disappeared into the trees with a swiftness that belied his recent injury. Sarah watched until he was out of sight, then returned to the cabin where Emma waited on the porch. "He'll be all right," she assured her daughter, though. She wasn't entirely convinced herself. "I know," Emma said confidently. "He's brave." The rest of the day passed uneventfully as they returned to their normal routine. Sarah found herself glancing westward occasionally, wondering if Takwani had found his people or if he was still making his way across the dangerous terrain. That night, Sarah found it difficult to sleep. Something about Takwani's departure had left her uneasy. Perhaps it was just concern for his safety, or perhaps it was the knowledge that he was returning to a people who were actively at war with the settlers. Whatever the reason, she tossed and turned until the early hours of the morning, finally drifting into a fitful sleep just before dawn. She was awakened by Emma shaking her shoulder urgently. "Mama! Mama! Wake up!" Emma's voice was pitched high. With excitement or fear, Sarah couldn't immediately tell which. Sarah sat up quickly, instantly alert. "What is it? What's wrong?" "There are Indians, Mama," Emma whispered. "Lots of them, on horses, at the edge of our property." Sarah's blood ran cold. She leapt from the bed and ran to the window, Emma close behind her. What she saw made her heart nearly stop. Silhouetted against the rising sun were dozens of mounted warriors. She quickly counted at least 60, their feathered lances and painted faces stark against the pink and gold sky. At their center, on a magnificent black stallion, sat a man whose very posture radiated authority. His headdress of eagle feathers identified him as a chief. "Oh, God!" Sarah breathed. She turned to Emma, trying to keep her voice steady. "Emma, listen to me. No matter what happens, you stay inside. You hide under the bed, and you don't come out until I call you. Do you understand?" Emma nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "Is it because of Takwani?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. Now go hide quickly." As Emma scurried to obey, Sarah took a deep breath to steel herself. She grabbed Thomas's rifle from beside the door, knowing full well it would be useless against so many warriors, but unable to face them unarmed, with legs. That felt like lead. She walked onto the porch and stood tall, rifle at her side, as the sun crested the horizon behind the war party. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then from the center of the warriors, the chief raised his hand in a signal, and the entire party began to advance toward the cabin. Sarah gripped the rifle tighter as the Comanche war party approached. Her cabin, the rhythmic drumming of hooves on the hard-packed earth, seemed to match her racing heartbeat. She knew running was pointless, fighting even more so. 60 warriors against one woman with a single rifle. The outcome was inevitable. Her only hope was that they might spare Emma. The warriors fanned out in a semicircle before the cabin, their expressions impassive, their bodies adorned with paint that told stories Sarah couldn't read. Some carried rifles, others bows or lances. All wore the hard-earned confidence of men who had seen battle many times. The chief urged his black stallion forward until he was just 10 paces from the porch. Up close, his presence was even more imposing. His face was lined with years and weathered by the sun, but his eyes were sharp and alert, missing nothing. He wore a magnificent headdress of eagle feathers that cascaded down his back, and across his chest was a necklace of bear claws, similar to the one Takwani had worn. For a long moment, the chief said nothing, simply studying Sarah with those penetrating eyes. Then, to her surprise, he spoke in heavily accented but clear English. "You are the woman who helped my son." It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway, her mouth too dry to form words. The chief's gaze traveled to the rifle in her hands. "You think to fight Quanah Parker and his warriors with one gun?" Sarah swallowed hard. "No," she managed, "but I will protect my daughter." Something that might have been respect flickered across Quanah's face. He dismounted in one fluid motion, handing his reins to a warrior beside him. As he approached the porch steps, Sarah steeled herself, but kept the rifle pointed downward. "Where is the girl child?" Quanah asked. "Safe," Sarah replied, unwilling to reveal Emma's hiding place. Quanah nodded, as if her protectiveness was expected. "My son, Takwani, he told me what you did, how you healed his wound when others of your kind would have let him die, or worse." Sarah's mind raced. Takwani had obviously reached his people and told them about her. But was that good or bad? She couldn't read the chief's intentions. "He needed help," she said simply. "I couldn't turn away a child in need." Quanah climbed the first step of the porch, then stopped, leaving Sarah slightly above his eye level. It was a gesture of respect, she realized. He could have easily intimidated her by looming over her. "Many winters ago," Quanah said, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller, "my mother was taken by Texas Rangers. Her name was Nadua. Your people called her Cynthia Ann Parker. She was captured as a child, became Comanche, became my mother. Then the bluecoats took her back to live with the whites." His eyes hardened. "She died of sadness, away from her people, away from her sons." Sarah felt a chill run through her. Cynthia Ann Parker's story was well known among the settlers. Captured as a child in a raid, she had integrated into Comanche life so completely that when Texas Rangers rescued her years later, she had repeatedly tried to escape and return to her Comanche family. Sarah hadn't known she had died. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. Quanah studied her face, perhaps looking for insincerity, but found none. "The cycle of vengeance between our peoples is long and bloody. Each side takes lives, then more lives are taken in return." He gestured to the warriors behind him. "I have brought my men here today because of what you did for my son." Sarah's grip tightened on the rifle. This was it then. Despite her kindness to Takwani, she and Emma would pay the price for the actions of other white settlers. But Quanah's next words caught her completely off guard. "We have come to protect you." Sarah blinked, certain she had misheard. "Protect me?" Quanah nodded. "Word travels fast on the frontier. My scouts tell me that Ranger Johnson and his men know a Comanche boy was here. They ride for your cabin even now." Sarah's blood ran cold. How could they know? Jake Miller, perhaps. Had he seen something during his visit, or had someone else spotted Takwani? "Why would you protect me?" she asked, bewildered. "You saved my son when your people would have killed him," Quanah replied. "And I am tired of the endless circle of bloodshed. Perhaps it is time for new ways." From among the warriors, a horse broke formation and rode forward. On it sat Takwani, his wound obviously still paining him, but his back straight with pride. He had changed from Thomas's clothes back into traditional Comanche garb, and with his father's warriors around him, he looked far older than the injured boy Sarah had tended. "Sarah Blackwood," he called, "I told my father of your kindness, of your daughter's gift." He held up the wooden horse Emma had given him. "You have a good heart. You are not like the others." Before Sarah could respond, a shout came from the rear of the war party. A scout galloped up to Quanah, speaking rapidly in Comanche. Quanah's expression darkened as he listened. "Rangers," he said to Sarah, 12 men riding hard. They will be here soon." He turned and barked orders to his warriors, who immediately began to move, some taking up positions in the trees surrounding the cabin. others forming a defensive line between the property and the direction from which the Rangers would come. "Wait!" Sarah said frantically. "If they find you here, they'll think I'm collaborating with the enemy. They'll hang me for treason." Quanah considered this, then nodded grimly. "My warriors will hide. The Rangers must not know we are here unless necessary." He looked at Takwani. "You too, my son. Go with Standing Bear and the others." Takwani looked like he wanted to protest, but a stern glance from his father silenced him. He nodded reluctantly and rode back to join a group of warriors heading for the dense trees at the edge of the property. "What should I tell them?" Sarah asked, panic rising in her throat. "Tell them what they want to hear," Quanah advised. "Say the boy came. You drove him off with your rifle. Say nothing of healing him. And if they don't believe me," Quanah's expression was grim, "then Quanah Parker and his warriors will ensure they never doubt another woman's word again." Eins. That ominous promise, he returned to his horse, and with a few quick commands, the entire war party seemed to vanish into the surrounding landscape like morning mist. One moment they filled the clearing, the next they were gone, concealed in the trees, tall grass, and gullies around the property. Only Quanah remained visible, his black stallion half hidden in the shadow of a large oak at the edge of the yard. Sarah took a deep breath and went inside to fetch Emma. There was no time to flee, and the girl would be terrified if Rangers burst in looking for her. "Emma, come out now," Sarah called softly. "There are some men coming to visit us, Texas Rangers." Emma crawled out from under the bed, her small face pale with fear. "Are the Indians gone, Mama?" Sarah hesitated, unwilling to lie but not wanting to frighten Emma further. "They're not going to hurt us, sweetheart, but the Rangers don't need to know they were here. If they ask, you tell them we haven't seen any Indians except for one boy who ran away when I fired the rifle into the air. Do you understand?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Is this like when you told me not to tell Mr. Miller about Takwani?" "Yes, exactly like that. This is our secret." Sarah smoothed Emma's rumpled dress and quickly braided her blonde hair. "Come on now, let's go outside and wait for them. And remember, let me do most of the talking." They returned to the porch just as the sound of approaching horses became audible. Within minutes, a group of 12 Texas Rangers rode into view, dust billowing behind them. They were hard-faced men in wide-brimmed hats, each carrying multiple weapons. At their head rode Captain James Johnson, a man Sarah had met once or twice in town, a stern, uncompromising ranger with a reputation for efficiency and ruthlessness when dealing with the Indian problem. Sarah felt a prickle of fear run down her spine. Johnson was known for his unshakable conviction that the only good Comanche was a dead one. If he discovered she had helped Takwani, there would be no mercy. The Rangers reined in their horses in front of the cabin, Johnson dismounting while the others remained vigilant, scanning the surroundings. "Mrs. Blackwood," Johnson said, tipping his hat with cold courtesy, "we received word that a Comanche boy was seen near your property. Have you had any trouble?" Sarah met his gaze steadily, one hand on Emma's shoulder. "A boy came by yesterday. I fired a warning shot and he ran off. Haven't seen any sign of him since." Johnson's eyes narrowed slightly. He was a man who had built his career on sensing deception, and Sarah feared her story wasn't convincing him. "Just a boy. Alone," Johnson pressed. "Comanche don't usually let their young wander unaccompanied." "I can only tell you what I saw, Captain," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice even. "One boy wounded in the side. He didn't come close enough for me to see more." "Wounded, you say?" Johnson's interest sharpened. "We had a skirmish with a war party 3 days back. Wounded several before they retreated. Been tracking a blood trail on and off since then." He glanced around the property. "Mind if my men take a look around? Ensure there's no danger to you. And your daughter?" It wasn't really a request, Before Sarah could respond, Johnson was already signaling his men to spread out and search the area. "Of course," Sarah said, her heart pounding. "We have nothing to hide." Two rangers headed toward the shed where Takwani had recuperated. Sarah's stomach clenched. Had she left any evidence behind? Blood-stained bandages or other signs of his stay? Johnson remained with Sarah and Emma, his calculating gaze taking in every detail of their appearance. "Been living out here alone since your husband passed, haven't you, Mrs. Blackwood? Must be difficult." "We manage," Sarah replied stiffly. "Brave woman," Johnson said, though his tone suggested foolhardy rather than brave. "But these are dangerous times. The territorial governor is considering ordering all isolated homesteads abandoned until the Comanche threat is neutralized. For your own safety, of course." Sarah felt a flare of anger. "This is our home, Captain. We're not leaving it." Johnson shrugged. "May not have a choice, ma'am. Once the order comes through." One of the rangers who had been searching the shed approached. "Captain, you might want to see this." Sarah's blood ran cold as Johnson followed the man to the shed. They spoke in low voices, examining something on the ground that Sarah couldn't see from the porch. After a moment, Johnson returned, his expression harder than before. "Mrs. Blackwood, there's blood in that shed, fair amount of it, and what looks like some kind of poultice made from plants I don't recognize." His hand rested casually on his pistol. "Would you care to explain that?" Sarah's mind raced. "One of our goats was injured last week, cut itself on some fencing. I treated it in the shed." "With Indian medicine?" Johnson asked skeptically. "I use what works, Captain," Sarah replied, mustering as much dignity as she could. "My grandmother taught me about healing plants, works on goats just as well as people." For a long, tense moment, Johnson stared at her, clearly suspicious, but unable to prove she was lying. Finally, he nodded slightly. "Where's this injured goat now?" Sarah had anticipated the question. "It didn't make it. We butchered it 2 days ago, had goat stew that night." From the corner of her eye, Sarah saw movement in the trees beyond Johnson's shoulder, a flash of feathers, the gleam of a weapon. Quanah's warriors were watching, ready to intervene if necessary. Another ranger called from the edge of the property. "Tracks here, Captain, leading west. Look fresh." Johnson's attention shifted, much to Sarah's relief. "Comanche?" "Yes, sir. Several horses. Could be a scouting party." Johnson's expression darkened. "Mrs. Blackwood, gather whatever essentials you and your daughter need. You're coming back to Clearwater Springs with us." "What?" Sarah protested. "We can't just leave our home." "You don't have a choice," Johnson said flatly. "If there's a war party nearby, this is the first place they'll hit. 2 women alone wouldn't stand a chance." "I appreciate your concern, Captain, but we're staying," Sarah insisted. "My husband built this place with his own hands. I'm not abandoning it." Johnson's face hardened. "This isn't a request, ma'am. It's an order. For your protection and the child's." Emma pressed closer to Sarah's skirts, her small face frightened but resolute. "We want to stay home," she said in a small voice. Johnson ignored her, focusing on Sarah. "You have 5 minutes to gather your things, then we're leaving one way or another." The implied threat hung in the air between them. Sarah realized with a sinking heart that he was prepared to force them if necessary. Perhaps he even suspected her of collaborating with the Comanche and wanted her where he could keep an eye on her. "Mama," Emma whispered, looking up at her uncertainly. Before Sarah could respond, a new sound cut through the tense silence. A Comanche war cry, high and piercing, followed by another, then another, until the air seemed to vibrate with them. The rangers immediately drew their weapons, forming a defensive circle. "War party!" one of the rangers shouted. Johnson grabbed Sarah's arm roughly. "Did you signal them somehow?" he demanded. "Is this a trap?" "Don't be ridiculous," Sarah retorted, yanking her arm free. "If I were working with them, why would I still be here talking to you?" The war cries continued, seeming to come from all directions at once. Johnson barked orders to his men, who looked increasingly nervous. They were outnumbered, surrounded, and caught in the open. Suddenly, Quanah Parker emerged from the trees on his black stallion, riding slowly into the clearing. The war cries ceased, replaced by an ominous silence. Behind Quanah, warriors began to appear, first a few, then a dozen, then more, until all 60 were visible, encircling the Rangers completely. "Johnson," Quanah called, recognition clear. In his voice, "We will meet again." The Ranger captain's face contorted with hatred. "Parker, should have known you'd be behind this." "Put away your weapons," Quanah commanded. "You are surrounded. Your men will die if you fight." Johnson's laugh was harsh. "And we'll die if we surrender. No Ranger has ever been taken alive by Comanche, and I don't intend to be the first." "Today is different," Quanah replied calmly. "No blood need be shed if you listen." "Listen to what? More lies from a savage?" Johnson spat. Quanah's expression remained impassive, though Sarah noticed his warriors bristling at the insult. "The woman and her daughter," he said. "They are under my protection. You will not force them from their home." Johnson looked from Quanah to Sarah, his eyes widening with understanding. "So that's how it is. You're in league with them." He turned to his men. "The woman's a traitor." "No," Quanah interrupted sharply. "She is not in league with us. She showed kindness to a wounded boy. For that, I repay with protection." He addressed Sarah directly. "Tell him, Sarah Blackwood. Tell him what happened." Sarah hesitated, looking from Quanah to Johnson, then down at Emma, who watched the unfolding scene with wide, frightened eyes. The truth was her only option now. "3 days ago, a wounded Comanche boy came out of the woods onto my property," she said clearly, so all could hear. "He was 13 years old and dying from a knife wound and infection. I treated his wound and gave him food and shelter until he was strong enough to leave. That boy was Taquani, Chief Parker's son." Murmurs ran through the Rangers. Johnson's face darkened with fury. "You harbored an enemy of the territory," he growled. "That's treason, Mrs. Blackwood." "He was a child," Sarah shot back. "Not an enemy, just a hurt child." Quanah raised his hand, silencing the murmurs. "Johnson, you and your Rangers will leave this place now. The woman and her daughter stay. They are under my protection." "Your protection," Johnson scoffed. "And what happens when the next war party comes through? One that doesn't know about your special arrangement." "They will know," Quanah said simply. "All Comanche in this territory will know that the homestead of Sarah Blackwood is to be left in peace." He gestured toward the cabin. "I will mark it." And so, Johnson looked around at his outnumbered men, then back at Quanah. "And if I refuse to leave without them?" "Then you will not leave at all," Quanah replied, his tone matter-of-fact rather than threatening. A tense silence fell. Sarah could almost see Johnson calculating their chances. 12 Rangers against 60 warriors. Even with superior firearms, they were hopelessly outnumbered. "Captain," one of the Rangers said quietly, "we should withdraw, live to fight another day." For a moment Sarah thought Johnson would refuse, pride overriding his tactical sense. But then he gave a curt nod. "Mount up," he ordered. "We're pulling back." As the Rangers prepared to depart, Johnson turned to Sarah one last time. "This isn't over, Mrs. Blackwood. The territorial governor will hear about your kindness to the enemy." "Do what you must, Captain," Sarah replied steadily. "As will I." The Rangers mounted their horses and, with one last venomous glare at both, Sarah and Quanah, Johnson led them away at a canter, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Once they were gone, Sarah's knees nearly buckled with relief. Emma pressed against her side, and Sarah pulled her daughter close. Quanah approached the porch, his warriors remaining at a respectful distance. "They will return," he said without preamble. "Johnson is not a man who forgives." "I know," Sarah replied wearily. "But thank you for what you did today." Quanah inclined his head slightly. "I promised you protection, and Quanah Parker keeps his promises." He reached into a pouch at his waist and withdrew a small object, a carved stone pendant on a leather. Ithong. The pendant depicted an eagle with outstretched wings. "This is the symbol of my family," Quanah explained, holding it out to Sarah. "Hang it above your door. Any Comanche who sees it will know you are under my protection." Sarah accepted the pendant with a sense of wonder. "Thank you," she said softly. "But why go to such lengths for us?" "Because my son lives because of you," Quanah replied simply, "and because there has been enough killing between our peoples." From among the warriors, Takwani urged his horse forward to join his father. He looked at Sarah and Emma with solemn eyes that seemed too old for his young face. "I bring others," he said in his limited English, gesturing to the warriors, "to keep a promise, to protect." Emma stepped forward, her initial fear of the warriors apparently forgotten. "I still have your bear claw," she told Takwani, pulling it from a pocket in her dress to show him. "I keep it with me all the time." A rare smile broke across Takwani's face. "Good medicine," he said approvingly. "Keep safe." Quanah watched this exchange with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read, perhaps hope, perhaps sadness. "We must go now," he said after a moment, "but we will watch over this place. If Johnson returns with more men, we will know." "What will happen to us when you leave the territory?" Sarah asked, voicing the concern that had been growing in her mind. The Comanche were gradually being forced westward by the relentless expansion of white settlement. Quanah's protection wouldn't last forever. "I do not leave," Quanah said firmly. "This is Comanche land, has been for many generations, will be for many more." Sarah wasn't so sure. The tide of settlement seemed unstoppable, with more pioneers arriving each year, but she nodded in acknowledgement of his determination. "What about the authorities?" she pressed. "Johnson will report what happened here. They might send soldiers next time, not just rangers." Quanah's expression was resolute. "Then we will deal with soldiers." He mounted his horse in one fluid motion. "Hang the pendant, keep your rifle close, we will be watching." With a gesture to his warriors, Quanah prepared to depart. Before they left, Takwani approached the porch one last time. "Sarah Blackwood," he said formally. "Emma Blackwood, you are friends with Takwani, to people." He touched his chest, where his wound was still healing. "I not forget." With that he rejoined his father, and the entire war party wheeled their horses and rode away, eventually disappearing into the western horizon like ghosts. Sarah and Emma stood on the porch long after they were gone, the eagle pendant clutched in Sarah's hand, the future uncertain, but somehow less frightening than it had been before. "Are we friends with the Indians now, Mama?" Emma asked, her voice small but curious. Sarah looked down at the pendant, then at the wooden cross that hung beside her door, symbols of two worlds that had been at war for generations. "I think," she said slowly, "we're friends with people who recognize kindness when they see it, no matter where they come from." Emma considered this, then nodded. "Like Takwani." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "Like Takwani." She hung the eagle pendant above the door, next to the cross, where it would be visible to anyone who approached. Then she took Emma's hand and led her inside to prepare supper, wondering what the coming days would bring. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the homestead, Sarah thought she glimpsed movement at the edge of the property. Perhaps a lone rider watching from the trees. She lifted her hand in acknowledgement, and after a moment the figure returned the gesture before melting back into the gathering dusk. For the first time since Thomas died, Sarah felt truly safe on the frontier, not because of walls or weapons, but because of an unexpected alliance born from a simple act of compassion. And in that moment, she knew that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them stronger than before. Autumn came to the Texas frontier in a blaze of copper and gold. The scorching heat of summer yielded to crisp mornings and pleasant afternoons. For Sarah and Emma Blackwood, the changing season brought not only a reprieve from the drought, but also an uneasy peace. 2 months had passed since the standoff between Quanah Parker's warriors and Captain Johnson's rangers. True to Quanah's word, no Comanche raiders had troubled the Blackwood homestead. The eagle pendant hanging above their door had become a talisman of sorts, drawing curious glances from the few visitors they received, but apparently serving its intended purpose. The rangers, however, were another matter entirely. Johnson had made good on his threat to report Sarah to the territorial authorities. 3 weeks after the confrontation, a stern-faced official had ridden out from Austin with a formal censure, accusing her of rendering aid and comfort to hostile Indians. Only the fact that she was a widow with a young child had spared her from more severe consequences. The man had informed her with obvious disapproval. "You're being watched, Mrs. Blackwood," he'd warned before departing. "Any further contact with the Comanche will not be treated so leniently." Sarah had accepted the censure with outward humility and inward defiance. The official had made no attempt to remove the eagle pendant, either not recognizing its significance or choosing to ignore it. Since then, ranger patrols had made a point of passing by the Blackwood homestead at least once a week, ostensibly to ensure her safety, but clearly to monitor her activities. Sarah endured their scrutiny with stoic patience, offering coffee and cornbread when they stopped, but volunteering no information beyond pleasantries about the weather and crops. "Mama, why does Mr. Johnson hate us now?" Emma had asked after a particularly tense visit from the ranger captain himself. Sarah had chosen her words carefully. "He doesn't hate us, sweetheart. He just doesn't understand why we helped Taquani." "Because he was hurt and needed help," Emma had replied with a child's straightforward logic. "Yes, but Captain Johnson sees things differently. He thinks all Comanche are enemies. Even children. Even children," Sarah had confirmed sadly. Now, as Sarah harvested the last of her modest corn crop, she reflected on how their lives had changed. The settlement had largely ostracized them after word spread about the incident. Former friends crossed the street to avoid speaking with her in town. The sympathetic nods she'd received as Thomas's widow had transformed into suspicious glares and whispered conversations that abruptly ended when she approached. Only the Millers, Jake and Martha, had stood by them, though even they seemed uncomfortable with Sarah's newfound notoriety. "Folks'll forget eventually," Jake had assured her last week while helping repair her chicken coop. "Just need to give it time." Sarah wasn't so sure. The frontier had a long memory for perceived betrayal, and in the eyes of many settlers, she had chosen the enemy over her own kind. As she gathered the last of the cornstalks, Sarah spotted a rider approaching from the direction of Clearwater Springs. She straightened, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun to identify the visitor. It was Martha Miller, riding her dappled mare at a brisk trot. Sarah set down her basket and walked to meet her, noting the unusual urgency in Martha's posture. The older woman rarely rode out alone, especially with such haste. "Martha," Sarah called as the woman drew near. "Is everything all right?" Martha reined in her horse, her normally pleasant face tight with worry. "Sarah, I had to warn you. There's trouble brewing in town." Sarah's stomach knotted. "What kind of trouble?" "Captain Johnson returned from Austin yesterday. He brought a new order from the territorial governor." Martha glanced around nervously, as though expecting to find eavesdroppers among the cornstalks. "All isolated homesteads within 20 miles of the settlement are to be abandoned until the Comanche threat is neutralized." "Abandoned?" Sarah repeated incredulously. "They can't do that." "They can and they are," Martha replied grimly. 3 families have already been relocated to town. The Petersons tried to resist. Mr. Peterson said they couldn't just leave their livestock. Johnson had him arrested, Sarah. They're holding him in the jailhouse until his family complies. Sarah felt her cheeks flush with anger. This is about me, isn't it? Johnson's using this order to force me off my land. Martha hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Jake heard them talking at the saloon last night. Johnson told the mayor that your alliance with the hostiles, as he called it, was a threat to the entire settlement. Said the governor agreed that you should be among the first removed. When are they coming? Sarah asked, her mind already racing through options. Tomorrow morning. A squad of rangers, plus some deputies from town. Martha reached over and squeezed Sarah's hand. Jake wanted to come tell you himself, but he's being watched too closely. They suspect he's sympathetic to your situation. Thank you for risking this visit, Sarah said sincerely. I won't forget it. Martha's expression grew more troubled. What will you do? You can't fight them, Sarah. No, Sarah agreed, but I won't simply abandon my home either. This land is all Emma and I have left of Thomas. You could come stay with us, Martha offered. Just until this blows over, Sarah smiled sadly. Your place is within the 20-mile limit too, isn't it? Martha nodded reluctantly. We've been told to prepare for relocation by the end of the week. Then we'd all just end up in town under Johnson's thumb. Sarah squeezed Martha's hand in return, then released it. Thank you for the offer, but I need to think. I need to decide what's best for Emma. Martha clearly wanted to say more, but seemed to sense Sarah's need to process this information alone. She gathered her reins. Whatever you decide, we're with you. Jake said to tell you that. It means more than you know, Sarah replied. Now go on before someone notices you're missing. After Martha departed, Sarah returned to the cabin, her harvest forgotten. Emma was inside, practicing her letters, at the small table Thomas had built. Who was that riding away, Mama? She asked without looking up from her slate. Mrs. Miller with some news from town. Sarah kept her voice casual, not wanting to alarm her daughter. Emma, how would you feel about a little adventure? Emma looked up, instantly interested. What kind of adventure? Well, I was thinking we might take a trip for a few days, pack some supplies and go visiting. Emma's brow furrowed skeptically. Visiting who? Nobody in town talks to us anymore except the Millers. Sometimes Sarah forgot how perceptive children it could be. She sat down beside her daughter, choosing honesty over pretense. Some men from town want us to leave our home for a while. I don't think that's right, so we're going to go away until they change their minds. Is it because of Taquani? Emma asked. Sarah nodded. Partly. Some people are still angry that we helped him. Where will we go? That was the question Sarah had been asking herself since Martha's revelation. Where could they go that the rangers wouldn't find them? They had no family within hundreds of miles, and no friends beyond the Millers who would risk sheltering them. An idea formed in her mind. Dangerous, perhaps even foolhardy, but possibly their only option. The eagle pendant hanging above there. A door suddenly seemed like more than a symbol of protection. It was an invitation. I have an idea, Sarah said carefully, but it might sound a little scary at first. Emma set down her chalk. Are we going to find Taquani? The directness of the question startled Sarah. Why would you think that? Emma shrugged. Because he's our friend, and his father said they would protect us. Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah thought. Yes, she admitted. I think we might try to find Quanah Parker and his people, just until it's safe to come back home. Instead of fear, Emma's face lit up with excitement. Will I get to ride a horse like Taquani and sleep in one of those triangle houses? They're called teepees, Sarah corrected with a small smile. And I don't know. This won't be a pleasure trip, Emma. It might be dangerous, and we'll have to be very careful. I can be careful, Emma assured her solemnly, and I'm not afraid. Taquani gave me his bear claw for protection, remember? Sarah did remember. Emma still carried the bear claw in her pocket each day, a talisman against childhood fears. "All right then," Sarah decided. "We'll need to pack tonight after dark. Only what we can carry on Penny." Their aging mare wasn't the strongest animal, but she was steady and would have to suffice. "We'll leave before dawn." As Emma helped gather essential supplies, clothing, food, medicines, Thomas's rifle and ammunition, Sarah tried to suppress her doubts. Was she making a terrible mistake, leading her child into the territory of people who, despite Quanah's personal assurance, had been at war with settlers for generations? What if they couldn't find Quanah's band? What if they encountered other Comanche who didn't recognize or honor the chief's protection? But the alternative, forced relocation to Clearwater Springs, living under Johnson's suspicious gaze, perhaps even separated from Emma if the authorities decided she was an unfit mother due to her traitorous actions, seemed equally untenable. By midnight, their preparations were complete. Sarah had packed as efficiently as possible: pemmican and cornmeal for sustenance, a small cooking pot, extra blankets, medicines, the rifle, a knife, flint and steel, and a few precious mementos they couldn't bear to leave behind, including Thomas's Bible and Emma's wooden doll. She'd also carefully removed the eagle pendant from above the door and tucked it securely in her pocket. They slept fitfully for a few hours, then rose while the night was still deep. Sarah fed and watered the chickens one last time, leaving their coop open so they could forage freely. She left the cow's gate ajar as well, hoping the animal would find its way to the miller's place if they were gone too long. As the first hint of grey touched the eastern sky, Sarah boosted Emma onto Penny's back, secured their packs, and took the mare's reins to lead her on foot. They would move faster if Sarah rode as well, but the horse couldn't carry both of them, plus their supplies for long. "Ready?" Sarah asked, looking up at her daughter's small figure silhouetted against the lightening sky. Emma nodded, clutching Penny's mane. "Which way do we go?" Sarah had considered this carefully. During the confrontation 2 months ago, Quanah and his warriors had departed to the west, but that didn't necessarily mean their camp lay in that direction. Still, it was their best lead. "West," she decided, "and we'll need to avoid the main trails. The rangers will likely take those when they come for us." They set off across the cornfield and into the belt of trees that marked the western boundary of the Blackwood property. Sarah had explored these woods often enough to navigate them, but beyond lay more unfamiliar territory. She carried a crude map Thomas had drawn years ago, but it showed only major landmarks and waterways. The rising sun found them several miles from the homestead, following a small stream that Sarah hoped would lead to the larger creek shown on Thomas's map. Emma had been quiet and brave, asking few questions and maintaining her perch on Penny without complaint. "We'll rest soon," Sarah promised, noting her daughter's drooping shoulders. "Just need to put more distance between us and home first." As if summoned by her words, the distant sound of hoofbeats reached them. Sarah froze, listening intently. Multiple riders moving quickly, coming from the direction of Clearwater Springs. "The Rangers," she whispered. "They must have started early." She led Penny quickly into a dense thicket of junipers, positioning the horse between the direction of the sounds and the stream. "Stay absolutely quiet," she instructed Emma, who nodded with wide eyes. The hoofbeats grew louder, then slowed. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized the riders had reached their homestead. Would they immediately notice their absence, begin tracking them? Johnson was known for his abilities as a tracker. It was one reason he'd risen to captain so quickly. Minutes stretched like hours as they waited in tense silence. Finally, the sounds of activity at the distant homestead ceased, followed by the thunder of horses moving out at a gallop, heading not west, but south. "They're going toward the Millers," Sarah realized aloud. "They must think we went there." "Did Mrs. Miller tell them that?" Emma asked, confusion in her voice. "No, sweetheart, they probably just assumed that's where we'd go." Sarah felt a pang of guilt for Martha and Jake, who would now face questioning, but the misdirection, however unintentional, bought them precious time. "Come on, we need to keep moving while they're looking in the wrong direction," they continued, westward, following the stream, until it joined the larger creek Sarah had hoped to find. By midday, they had covered nearly 10 miles by Sarah's estimation, though their pace was slowed by the need to remain concealed and to rest Penny periodically. They stopped in a sheltered hollow to eat some pemmican and cornbread and to refill their water skins from the creek. Emma, tired from the journey but still animated by the adventure of it all, waded in the shallow water, while Sarah consulted Thomas's map. If her calculations were correct, they were now well beyond the settled areas around Clearwater Springs. This was the true frontier, a no-man's land claimed by both settlers and Comanche, but controlled by neither. Sarah had never ventured this far west before, and the vastness of the landscape was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. "How will we?" "Pentaquani, Mama?" Emma asked, returning from the creek with wet feet and a small collection of pretty stones. "I'm not sure," Sarah admitted, "but I think we should look for signs of Comanche camps or hunting parties. They might lead us to Quanah's band." "What kind of signs?" "Tracks, campfire remains, markings on trees." Sarah had heard descriptions of such things from travelers and traders who passed through Clearwater Springs. "And when we find Comanche, we'll show them the eagle pendant. If Quanah's word is respected as he claimed, it should protect us." They resumed their journey as the afternoon waned, the terrain gradually changing from wooded creek bottoms to more open country with scattered groves of oak and mesquite. The land rose in gentle swells, offering broader vistas with each crest they crossed. In the distance, blue-tinged hills marked the edge of the plains. It was on one such rise that Sarah spotted them, a small group of mounted figures silhouetted against the western sky, perhaps a mile distant. Too far to identify, but their appearance and formation strongly suggested Comanche riders. Sarah quickly led Penny into the nearest grove of trees, concealing themselves while she considered their options. If these were Quanah's people, approaching them might be their salvation. If not, it could be disastrous. "I see Indians," Emma whispered excitedly from her perch. "Are they Taquani's family?" "I don't know," Sarah replied honestly. "But we need to be careful. Let me think." The riders were moving in their general direction, though not directly toward them. Sarah estimated they would pass within a quarter-mile of their position, close enough to signal if she decided to make contact, but far enough to remain hidden if she chose caution. After several minutes of internal debate, Sarah made her decision. Remaining hidden would only delay the inevitable. If they were to find refuge with the Comanche, they would have to take the risk of revealing themselves sooner or later. "Emma, I'm going to try to signal those riders," she explained. "I want you to stay here with Penny, hidden in the trees. If anything happens to me, if there's any trouble at all, I want you to get back on Penny and ride east as fast as you can. Try to find your way back to the Millers." Emma's face crumpled with sudden fear. "No, Mama, I want to stay with you." Sarah hugged her daughter tightly. "Nothing's going to happen. This is just in case. I have to be smart and plan for everything, remember?" Reluctantly, Emma nodded. Sarah helped her down from Penny and settled her in a well-concealed spot with a clear view of the open ground where Sarah would make her approach. "The eagle pendant," Emma remembered suddenly. "You need to show them." Sarah smiled and patted her pocket where the pendant rested. "I have it right here. Now remember, stay hidden until I call for you." With a deep breath to steady her nerves, Sarah walked out from the trees onto the open ridge. The Comanche riders were closer now, their details becoming clearer. There were 6 of them, all men, all armed with bows or rifles. They were definitely Comanche. Judging by their distinctive riding style and appearance, Sarah raised both arms above her head in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent. For a heart-stopping moment, the riders continued without appearing to notice her. Then, as one, they wheeled their horses and charged directly toward her position. Sarah held her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to flee. The riders approached at breathtaking speed, spreading out to flank her as they neared. When they were perhaps 50 yards away, they abruptly reined in, creating a semicircle around her but maintaining their distance. One rider, wearing a bandolier of ammunition across his chest and a single eagle feather in his hair, spoke sharply in Comanche. His tone made the question clear, even if Sarah couldn't understand the words. With slow, deliberate movements, Sarah reached into her pocket and withdrew the eagle pendant. She held it up so all could see, the carved stone gleaming in the late afternoon sun. The effect was immediate. The warriors exchanged glances and rapid words in Comanche. The leader urged his horse forward, studying Sarah's face intently as he approached. "Where do you get this?" he demanded in broken English, pointing to the pendant. "From Chief Quanah Parker," Sarah replied steadily. "My name is Sarah Blackwood. I helped his son, Taquani, when he was wounded." Recognition dawned in the warrior's eyes. "The healing woman," he said. "Taquani, speak of you." Relief swept through Sarah so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. "Yes, my daughter and I need to find Quanah. We need his protection." The warrior frowned slightly. "Why, white woman? Seek Comanche now?" Sarah explained as concisely as she could about the rangers, the relocation order, and their flight from the homestead. The warrior listened impassively, but she thought she detected a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. When she finished, he nodded once. "I am Grey Wolf, brother to Quanah's second wife. We take you to him." Sarah could hardly believe their luck. "My daughter and our horse are in the trees," she said, pointing. "May I call them out?" Grey Wolf nodded, and Sarah turned to signal Emma. She emerged hesitantly from the trees, leading Penny by the reins. The Comanche warriors watched with undisguised curiosity as the small blonde girl approached. "Emma, this is Grey Wolf," Sarah introduced. "He's going to take us to Quanah and Taquani." Emma studied the imposing warrior for a moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the bear claw Taquani had given her. "Taquani gave me this," she said, holding it up as Sarah had done with the pendant. "For protection." Grey Wolf's stern face softened almost imperceptibly. "Good medicine," he said, echoing Taquani's words from months before. He turned to his companions and spoke rapidly in Comanche. One of them dismounted and approached Penny, examining the mare with a critical eye before nodding to Grey Wolf. "Horse." "I'm tired," Grey Wolf observed. "You ride with us. Horse follow." Before Sarah could respond, he leaned down from his mount and extended his arm. With only a moment's hesitation, she grasped it, and he swung her up behind him on his horse with surprising strength. Another warrior did the same for Emma, who let out a small squeal of surprise as she found herself seated in front of a young Comanche brave, barely out of his teens. "Hold tight," Grey Wolf instructed Sarah. "Camp far." With that, the party set, off at a ground-eating lope, Penny trotting behind them on a lead, held by one of the warriors. Sarah clung to Grey Wolf's waist, acutely aware of the strangeness of her situation. 24 hours ago, she had been harvesting corn on her homestead. Now, she was riding through the wilderness with a band of Comanche warriors seeking sanctuary, with the very people she had been raised to fear. As the sun sank toward the horizon, painting the western hills in shades of amber and purple, Sarah caught sight of Emma on the horse ahead. Despite the gravity of their circumstances, her daughter's face shone with excitement and wonder. In that moment, Sarah felt an unexpected sense of peace settle over her. Whatever challenges awaited them in Quanah's camp, they had chosen their own path rather than submitting to the one Johnson and the territorial authorities had tried to force upon them. As twilight deepened into night and the first stars appeared, Overhead, Sarah thought she could make out the distant glow of campfires against the darkening landscape. Grey Wolf confirmed her observation with a single word: home. The Comanche camp sprawled across a sheltered valley nestled between rolling hills. As Grey Wolf led their party down the slope, Sarah counted at least 30 teepees arranged in a rough circle, their silhouettes stark against the night sky. Cook fires dotted the encampment, casting flickering orange light on the people moving among them. Several hundred Comanche, Sarah estimated, men, women and children going about their evening activities. Their approach did not go unnoticed. Children spotted them first, pointing and calling out. Adults turned to watch, their expressions shifting from casual interest to wary curiosity as they identified the two white figures among the returning warriors. Grey Wolf led them directly to the center of the camp, where the largest teepee stood. Decorated with painted symbols and topped with a crown of eagle feathers, it clearly belonged to someone of importance. Quanah Parker, Sarah assumed. They halted before this teepee, and Grey Wolf dismounted, motioning for Sarah to do the same. The young warrior carrying Emma brought his horse alongside, helping the little girl down with unexpected gentleness. "Wait here," Grey Wolf instructed, before ducking through the teepee's entrance flap. As they stood in the firelight, surrounded by curious onlookers, Sarah fought to control her nerves. She drew Emma close, acutely aware of how vulnerable they were. The Comanche maintained a respectful distance, but their stares were intense and evaluating. A small commotion near one of the fires caught Sarah's attention. A boy had jumped to his feet and was running toward them, dodging adults who tried to stop him. "Takwani," Emma whispered, recognizing him before Sarah did. It was indeed Takwani, looking healthier and stronger than when they'd last seen him. He skidded to a halt before them, his face split in an uncharacteristic grin. "Sarah Blackwood, Emma Blackwood," he exclaimed, clearly having practiced their names. "You come." Despite their circumstances, Sarah couldn't help returning his smile. "Hello, Takwani. Yes, we've come to see your father." Takwani nodded eagerly. "Father, speak with Grey Wolf now." He touched his side where his wound had been. "See? Strong now. You make good medicine. I'm glad you're better," Sarah said sincerely. Emma stepped forward, pulling the bear claw from her pocket. "I kept it safe, just like you said." Takwani's expression grew serious as he nodded approvingly. "Good medicine. Keep safe always." Before they could converse further, the teepee flap opened and Grey Wolf emerged, followed by Quanah Parker. The Comanche chief was as imposing as Sarah remembered, his tall figure commanding immediate respect. He wore a simple buckskin shirt and leggings tonight, without the elaborate headdress from their previous encounter, but his authority was unmistakable. Quanah's eyes found Sarah's immediately. "Sarah Blackwood," he said, his deep voice carrying across the suddenly quiet camp. "Why do you come to my people?" Sarah stepped forward, conscious of the hundreds of eyes upon her. With steady hands, she withdrew the eagle pendant from her pocket and held it up. "You gave me this as a sign of your protection," she said clearly. "Now I need that protection. The rangers and territorial authorities have ordered all homesteaders to abandon their lands. They would force us into the settlement, where Captain Johnson has sworn to punish me for helping your son." Quanah took the pendant from her hands, examining it briefly before returning his gaze to Sarah. "So you flee from your own people to seek shelter with the Comanche?" Sarah lifted her chin. "I fled people who would punish compassion and force us from our home. I came to the one person who promised me protection when I needed it." A murmur ran through the gathered Comanche as Grey Wolf translated her words. Sarah couldn't interpret their reaction, but she thought she detected hints of approval among some faces. Quanah studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then unexpectedly he smiled, a small quirk of his lips that transformed his stern countenance. "The woman who saved my son is brave," he announced, loud enough for all to hear. The Comanche respect bravery. He gestured toward his teepee. Come, we will talk. With that simple invitation, Sarah felt the tension in the camp dissipate. Not completely. Many still watched her with suspicion, but Quanah's acceptance had established her status for the moment. Takwani fell beside Emma as they followed Quanah into the large teepee. Inside, a fire burned in a central pit, its smoke rising through an opening at the peak. Furs and woven blankets covered the ground, creating comfortable seating areas. Several women were present, one nursing an infant, another grinding something in a stone mortar. They looked up with interest as the visitors entered. "My wives," Quanah explained briefly, gesturing to the women, "and my youngest son." He nodded toward the infant. Grey Wolf took a position near the entrance, while Quanah indicated that Sarah and Emma should sit on a buffalo hide near the fire. Takwani settled next to Emma, clearly pleased to be reunited with his friend. The older of Quanah's wives brought them wooden bowls containing a rich stew of meat and wild roots. Sarah thanked her, surprised by the immediate hospitality. She and Emma ate gratefully, the food delicious after their long journey. When they had finished, Quanah dismissed the women with a few words in Comanche. They departed, taking Takwani with them, despite his obvious reluctance to leave Emma's side. "Now," Quanah said, once they were alone, except for Grey Wolf, "tell me everything." Sarah recounted the events since their last meeting, the ostracism from the settlement, Johnson's harassment, and finally the relocation order and their flight west. Quanah listened attentively, occasionally asking Grey Wolf to clarify a particular English phrase. "This Johnson," Quanah said when she had finished, "he is a man consumed by hatred. I have known many such men, both white and Comanche. They bring suffering wherever they go. He won't stop looking for us," Sarah admitted. "Especially now that we've fled." Quanah nodded, unsurprised. "What do you ask of me, Sarah Blackwood?" Sarah had been pondering this question throughout their journey. "Sanctuary," she said finally. "A safe place for Emma and me until we can return to our home. Or," she hesitated, "if we cannot return, guidance on where we might go to start anew, beyond Johnson's reach." Quanah considered her words, his fingers absently tracing the eagle carving on the pendant. "You may stay with my people," he decided. "There is a small teepee near my sister's that is empty. It will be yours while you are here." Relief washed over Sarah. "Thank you. But you should know," Quanah continued, his expression grave, "that our own situation is not secure. The white man's army pushes us constantly. We move camp often. This is not a peaceful life like your homestead." "I understand," Sarah said, though in truth she could only imagine what their nomadic existence truly entailed. "There is more," Quanah added. "Some of my people will not welcome you. They have suffered too much at the hands of white settlers. They will tolerate you because I command it, but you must be careful." Sarah appreciated his frankness. "We'll be respectful guests, and perhaps I can make myself useful. I have knowledge of healing plants and medicines." Interest flickered in Quanah's eyes. "Our medicine woman, Spotted Fawn, might welcome your knowledge. She grows old, and her apprentice died last winter of the coughing sickness." Grey Wolf spoke up for the first time since entering the teepee. "The child," he said, nodding toward Emma, who had dozed off against Sarah's side. "She is small but strong. Rode well today. No fear." Quanah smiled faintly, like her mother. He rose to his feet, signaling the end of their conversation. "Rest. Tonight, tomorrow, Feather Woman, my sister, will show you our ways." As Quanah held the tipi flap open for them, Sarah gathered the sleeping Emma in her arms. "Thank you for your hospitality," she said formally. "We won't forget this kindness." Quanah's response surprised her. "It is not good to repay a debt You saved my son's life. The Comanche do not forget such things. Grey Wolf led them to a small teepee on the eastern side of the camp. It was modest but clean, with fresh hides on the ground and a small fire already, kindled in the central pit. Sarah laid Emma gently on one of the sleeping robes provided, then turned to Grey Wolf. "Our horse," she began. "With our ponies," he assured her. "Safe." With a respectful nod, he left them alone. Sarah sank down beside Emma, the events of the past 2 days catching up with her in a wave of exhaustion. Despite her fatigue, sleep eluded her as she gazed at the smoke hole above, through which stars were visible in the clear night sky. What had they begun? How long would they live among the Comanche? Would they ever return to their homestead? Or was this the beginning of an entirely new life? The questions circled in her mind until finally, near dawn, she drifted into restless slumber. Morning announced itself with a symphony of unfamiliar sounds. Horses nickering, children laughing, women calling to one another in Comanche, the rhythmic pounding of something being beaten or ground. Sarah opened her eyes to find Emma already awake and peering curiously out the teepee flap. "Mama," she whispered excitedly, "there are so many children, and horses, and everyone wears such interesting clothes." Sarah smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. At least one of them was adapting easily to their new circumstances. She joined Emma at the entrance, taking in the bustling activity of the camp. In daylight, the Comanche began their day early, it seemed. Women tended cook fires or worked at various crafts. Men gathered in small groups, some working on weapons or tools, others preparing for what appeared to be a hunting expedition. Children darted between teepees, engaged in games or small chores. A middle-aged woman approached their teepee, her long black hair streaked with silver and arranged in 2 thick braids. She wore a beautifully beaded buckskin dress and carried a bundle in her arms. "I am Feather Woman," she introduced herself in accented but clear English. "Quanah's sister. He says, I am to help you learn our ways." Sarah stepped outside, Emma close behind her. "Thank you for your help. I'm Sarah, and this is my daughter Emma." Feather Woman nodded, her dark eyes appraising them frankly. "Your clothes," she said, extending the bundle she carried. "They mark you as different. These will help you blend more." Sarah accepted the offering. 2 sets of Comanche clothing, one sized for her and one for Emma. The gesture touched her. Proper clothing was a practical necessity, but also symbolic of their acceptance, however temporary. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "This is very kind." Feather Woman's expression remained neutral. "Quanah says you know healing plants. Is this true?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "My mother and grandmother taught me." Feather Woman seemed to approve of this connection to maternal teaching. "Spotted Fawn will want to speak with you. First food, then clothes, then work." The day passed in a whirlwind of new experiences. After a breakfast of cornmeal porridge sweetened with wild honey, Feather Woman helped them don their new clothing. Sarah found the soft buckskin dress more comfortable than she had expected, though moving in moccasins instead of her sturdy boots required adjustment. Emma, transformed in her miniature version of Comanche dress, was quickly absorbed into a group of children her age. Despite the language barrier, they seemed to communicate through gestures and the universal language of play. Sarah watched anxiously at first, but the children's acceptance of Emma appeared genuine, if curious. Feather Woman introduced Sarah to Spotted Fawn, the elderly medicine woman. Bent with age but sharp-eyed and quick-minded, she questioned Sarah extensively about her knowledge of plants and healing methods. Their conversation, translated by Feather Woman, revealed both differences and surprising similarities in their approaches. "Your plant knowledge is good," Spotted Fawn pronounced. "Finally, you will help me gather tomorrow. By mid-afternoon, Sarah found herself assisting the women in scraping a fresh deer hide, one of many tasks she observed being distributed among the tribe's females. The work was hard but communal, with women conversing and occasionally laughing as they worked. Though Sarah couldn't understand their words, the rhythm of their interaction felt familiar, reminding her of quilting circles and harvest gatherings back in the settlement. As evening approached, Emma returned to her side, flushed, with excitement from a day of exploration and play. "Mama, I learned some Comanche words," she announced proudly. "And Takwani showed me how to make a grass whistle. And I met his cousins, and we saw the new babies in the horse herd." Sarah smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm, relieved that Emma was adapting so well. "Did you thank Takwani for showing you?" "Oh, these things," Emma nodded vigorously. "He says tomorrow he'll teach me to ride a proper Comanche pony, not an old farm horse like Penny." She looked momentarily guilty. "I told him Penny was a good horse, though." "That was right to do," Sarah assured her. "We should always be grateful for what has served us well." As darkness fell, the camp gathered around communal fires for the evening meal. Sarah and Emma sat with Featherwoman's family, including her husband, 2 bears, and their 3 children. Though 2 bears spoke no English, he treated them with grave courtesy, ensuring they received ample portions of the roasted venison and wild onions that comprised the meal. Across the central fire, Sarah caught Quanah watching them, his expression thoughtful. When their eyes met, he inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement before turning back to the warriors seated around him. The days that followed established a pattern. Each morning, Sarah worked with Spotted Fawn, either gathering medicinal plants or learning to prepare Comanche remedies. The old medicine woman was a demanding teacher, but seemed genuinely interested in exchanging knowledge, particularly about childbirth techniques and treatments for childhood ailments. In the afternoons, Sarah joined the women in whatever communal work was underway, processing hides, preparing pemmican for winter storage, repairing teepees, or crafting tools and utensils. Gradually, she learned simple phrases in Comanche, enough to understand basic instructions and offer greetings. Some women remained aloof, but others, following Featherwoman's example, began to accept her presence. Emma, meanwhile, flourished. Children adapt more quickly than adults, and she absorbed Comanche ways with remarkable ease. Under Takwani's tutelage, she learned to ride bareback, to identify edible plants, and to move silently through the tall grass. Her fair hair remained a source of fascination among the Comanche children, who sometimes reached out to touch it with wondering fingers. On their 10th evening in the camp, as Sarah sat outside their teepee weaving a basket under Featherwoman's instruction, Takwani approached with unusual seriousness. "My father wishes to speak with you," he informed her. "In his teepee, now." Sarah set aside her work, wondering what had prompted this summons. "Is everything all right?" Takwani shrugged. "Scouts returned. Much talking." With a sense of foreboding, Sarah followed him to Quanah's large teepee. Inside, she found not only the chief, but several of his senior warriors, including Grey Wolf, gathered around a small fire. Their expressions were grave. "Sarah Blackwood," Quanah greeted her. "Sit." She took the offered place, noting the tension in the air. "Has something happened?" Quanah exchanged glances with his warriors before responding. "Our scouts report many blue-coat soldiers at Fort Richardson, more than usual, and Texas Rangers riding with them." Sarah's stomach clenched. "Looking for us?" "Perhaps, but also for us. Always for us." Quanah's voice carried the weariness of a man who had spent his life being hunted. "They have questioned settlers about a white woman and child seen riding with Comanche warriors." "I've put your people in danger," Sarah realized aloud, guilt washing over her. Grey Wolf spoke up. Comanche is always in danger from bluecoats. This changes nothing, but it may force us to move camp sooner than planned, Quanah added. The soldiers will eventually find our trail. Sarah nodded, understanding the nomadic nature of their existence in a new and personal way. We'll be ready to move when you decide. There is more, Quanah continued. The Rangers have taken control of your homestead. Johnson lives there now, using it as a base for his patrols. The news struck Sarah like a physical blow. Johnson, living in the home Thomas had built with his own hands, sleeping in their beds, eating at their table, the violation felt deeply personal. The Rangers claim you abandoned your land, Quanah went on. Under territorial law, they say it can be claimed by others after sufficient time passes. How long? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 1 season, 3 moons. Quanah's eyes held sympathy but also practicality. You must decide, Sarah Blackwood. Wait and hope to reclaim your home, or accept that it is lost and look to a new future. The choice laid before her seemed impossible. Stay with the Comanche indefinitely, becoming ever more separated from her own culture and background, or somehow fight to reclaim her rightful property from armed men with the law ostensibly on their side. I need time to think, she said finally. Quanah nodded in understanding. Time is something we have little of, but what we have is yours. Speak with your daughter. Listen to your heart. Tell me your decision before the next full moon. As Sarah exited the teepee, the night air cool against her face, she found Emma waiting outside with Takwani and several other children. In the firelight, her daughter's face looked different somehow, more confident, more at home in these unfamiliar surroundings than Sarah felt herself. "What did Father say?" Takwani asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "Many things I need to think about," Sarah replied, unwilling to burden the children with the full weight of their situation. "Important decisions to make." Emma took her hand. "Is it about going home?" The perceptiveness of children never ceased to amaze Sarah. "Yes, partly, but don't worry about it tonight." As they walked back toward their teepee, Sarah noticed Emma's easy conversation with Takwani, the mix of English and Comanche they had developed between them. In just 10 days, her daughter had adapted to a completely different way of life with the resilience of youth. Could Sarah do the same? And more importantly, should she? What was truly best for Emma's future? These questions followed her into uneasy dreams that night, where she saw Thomas standing before their cabin, his face sorrowful, as rangers rode circles around him, and Quanah watching from a distant hill, the eagle pendant gleaming in his hand. The next morning it dawned clear and cool, with hints of autumn in the air. Sarah rose early, her mind still troubled by the decision she faced. She stepped outside to find Grey Wolf waiting, his expression unusually urgent. "Come," he said without preamble. "Quanah wants you. Now." She followed him quickly through the awakening camp, concerned at his haste. At Quanah's teepee, they found the chief already mounted on his black stallion, surrounded by warriors, preparing for what appeared to be a departure. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, looking up at Quanah's stern face. Scouts reported riders approaching from the east. Many riders. His eyes met hers directly. Rangers and soldiers. They found our trail sooner than expected. Fear clutched at Sarah's heart. Because of us? Are they following our trail? Perhaps. It doesn't matter now. We must move camp immediately. He gestured toward the western hills. There is a hidden valley 3 days' ride from here. The people will go there while we delay the bluecoats. We'll get ready right away, Sarah said, turning to rush back to their teepee. "Wait!" Quanah's command stopped her. "The soldiers are too close. The women, children, and elders need time to escape with our supplies and herds." His expression grew somber. "I need your help, Sarah Blackwood." "My help? How?" "The Rangers' search for a white woman and child. If you meet them, speak with them. You could delay their pursuit." Tell them you escaped from us. Lead them away from our people's trail." The request stunned Sarah. "You want me to go to them, to Johnson?" "It would save many lives," Quanah said simply. "Mine, Takwani's, all who have sheltered you." Sarah's mind erased. What Quanah suggested would certainly put her and Emma back in Johnson's hands, with all the uncertain consequences that entailed. Yet if she refused, she would be responsible for bringing danger to people who had protected them. "If I do this," she said slowly, "what happens to Emma and me afterward?" Quanah's gaze was steady. "You would have to return to your people. We would not be able to help you again without revealing your deception." The full implication hit Sarah hard. This wasn't just about briefly delaying the Rangers, it was a permanent parting of ways. She would have to leave the safety of the Comanche and face whatever punishment awaited her among the settlers. "I need to speak with Emma," she said finally. "This affects her too." Quanah nodded. "Quickly, we have little time." Sarah hurried back to their teepee, where she found Emma already awake and curious about the unusual activity in camp. As concisely and gently as possible, Sarah explained the situation and the choice before them. "If we go to the Rangers," she concluded, "we'll have to leave Takwani and the others. We'll probably have to go back to Clearwater Springs, at least for a while. But it might help keep our friends safe." Emma's small face grew serious as she absorbed this information. "Will the Rangers be mad at us? Will Mr. Johnson hurt you?" "I don't know," Sarah answered honestly. "But I think this might be our only chance to ever go home again." Emma was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "Takwani said sometimes the bravest warriors had to make sacrifices for the tribe," she said finally. "Is that what we would be doing?" Sarah's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Yes, something like that." "Then I think we should help them," Emma decided. "But I'll miss Takwani." "I know, sweetheart." Sarah hugged her daughter close. "So will I." When they returned to Quanah, the camp was already in motion, families dismantling teepees and packing belongings with practiced efficiency. The chief had gathered a small party of warriors, clearly intended as a rear guard to protect the retreat. "We will do as you ask," Sarah told him, her decision made. "We'll try to delay the Rangers and soldiers." Quanah dismounted and approached them. "You are brave, Sarah Blackwood, worthy of the eagle pendant." He removed the carving from around his neck and placed it in her hand. "Keep this. Remember us." "I will." Sarah closed her fingers around the pendant, the stone still warm from his body. "What should we tell them? How can we best help you?" "Tell them you escaped during the night, that we are heading northwest toward the Palo Duro Canyon." He pointed in a direction almost opposite to where the tribe would actually be fleeing. "This will give our people time to reach safety." Sarah nodded, memorizing the false information. "Where should we meet the Rangers?" "Grey Wolf will take you to a place on the Eastern Trail. You will wait there." As they prepared to depart, Takwani appeared suddenly, pushing through the warriors to reach them. His young face was a mask of confusion and hurt. "You leave?" he demanded of Emma. "Without saying goodbye?" Emma stepped forward, tears welling in her eyes. "We have to help your people, like you would do." Takwani looked from Emma to Sarah, understanding slowly dawning. "You go to Rangers? Pretend?" Sarah nodded. "To protect all of you." The boy straightened, conflict evident in his expression, before it resolved into grudging acceptance. He removed a small leather pouch from around his neck and pressed it into Emma's hand. "More protection," he said simply. "Never forget Takwani." Emma hugged him fiercely. "I won't. Ever." As Grey Wolf led them away from the disbanding camp, Sarah glanced back to see Quanah watching them, his tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun. He raised his hand once in farewell, a gesture she returned with a heavy heart. They were leaving safety for danger, friendship for potential hostility. Yet somehow, as they rode toward an uncertain reunion with their own people, Sarah felt not just fear, but a curious sense of coming full circle. The journey that had begun with her simple act of compassion toward a wounded Comanche boy had transformed their lives in ways she could never have imagined. Now that same spirit of compassion called them to make one final sacrifice for those who had sheltered them. "Are you ready?" Grey Wolf asked as they neared the position where they would wait for the approaching rangers. Sarah took a deep breath, squeezing Emma's hand in reassurance. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "We're ready." Escaping Fort Richardson proved easier than Sarah had feared. The very preparations for Mackenzie's campaign created the perfect cover for their departure. With soldiers focused on readying horses, weapons, and supplies, the night watch was reduced to a skeleton crew of tired men paying more attention to the activities inside the fort than to two figures slipping through the shadows. Sarah had spent their weeks at the fort, observing routines and weaknesses. She knew which section of the palisade wall adjoined the laundry building, creating a blind spot in the sentry rotations. She knew which stable hand could be bribed with a few coins to look the other way while they took two horses, not the finest mounts, but sturdy enough for their purpose. By midnight, they were 3 miles from the fort, riding west-northwest, under a quarter moon that provided just enough light to navigate by. Emma, wrapped in a wool blanket against the autumn chill, sat before Sarah on a dun mare chosen for its calm disposition. Behind them followed a bay gelding carrying their meager supplies, water, dried beef, cornmeal, a skillet, and the few possessions they'd accumulated at the fort. "How will we find Quanah?" Emma asked, her voice small in the vast darkness of the prairie. It was the question that had haunted Sarah since they'd formulated their desperate plan. During their time with the Comanche, she had learned some of their methods for leaving signs that only their own people could recognize. Bent grass stalks, arrangements of stones, broken twigs pointing in specific directions. But such signs would be meaningless if they didn't know where to look for them. "We'll start by heading to our meeting place with Grey Wolf," Sarah decided. "From there, we'll try to find their trail." It was a tenuous plan at best. The Comanche were experts at concealing their movements, especially when fleeing with their families. But it was their only chance. They rode through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. Sarah was acutely aware that by dawn their absence would be discovered. Whether Mackenzie would divert resources to pursue them was uncertain. The colonel seemed singularly focused on his campaign against the Comanche, but Johnson would certainly want them recaptured. As the eastern sky began to lighten, Sarah guided their horses into a densely wooded creek bottom that offered concealment from aerial view. They ate a cold breakfast of cornmeal cakes prepared the previous day, speaking little. Emma's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she made no complaint. "We'll rest here for a few hours," Sarah decided, "then continue when the sun is higher." Emma nodded sleepily, curling up on a bed of leaves with her head in Sarah's lap. Within minutes, she was asleep, her small face peaceful despite their precarious situation. Sarah remained alert, listening for any sound of pursuit. Instead, the woods filled with familiar morning noises, birds greeting the dawn, small creatures rustling in the underbrush, the gentle gurgle of the creek. She found herself remembering similar mornings in the Comanche camp, when women would emerge from their teepees to rebuild cook fires and begin the day's work, while children splashed in nearby streams. The memory brought an unexpected pang of homesickness. Not for their cabin in Clearwater Springs, but for the sense of community she had briefly found among Quanah's people. Despite initial suspicion, many had eventually accepted her, sharing their knowledge, including her in their daily routines. How strange that she, a white settler woman, should feel such longing for a way of life she had been raised to fear. By midday, they were moving again, following game trails that would conceal their tracks better than open prairie. Sarah kept them on a northwestern heading, hoping to intercept any signs of Quanah's band before Mackenzie's forces did. On the second day of their journey, they reached the meeting place where they had first encountered Grey Wolf and his warriors. Sarah dismounted, studying the ground carefully for any trace of recent Comanche presence. Emma joined her, having learned tracking basics from Taquani during their time with the tribe. "Look, Mama," Emma called, pointing to a seemingly random pile of stones near the base of a stunted oak tree. "Taquani showed me, 3 stones stacked, one pointing." Her small finger indicated how one oblong stone in the pile was oriented. Sarah examined the arrangement. If Emma was right, the stone was pointing southwest, a direction significantly different from both the northwest heading they'd given Mackenzie and the westward path they'd been following. "When did Taquani show you this?" Sarah asked. "When we were gathering berries," Emma replied. "He said his people leave these so others can find them if they get separated." Sarah felt a surge of hope. "Good girl, let's follow where it points." They altered their course, now moving southwest. Every few miles they would spot another subtle sign. Stones arranged in a particular pattern, a sapling bent in an unnatural direction. Markings on a tree that would appear random to the untrained eye, but conveyed meaning to those who knew how to read them. By the third day, Sarah was increasingly confident they were on the right track. The signs were becoming more frequent, suggesting they were drawing closer to their quarry, but time was against them. Mackenzie's cavalry could cover ground much faster than 2 women on horseback. If the colonel had indeed launched his campaign toward Palo Duro, he might already be engaging the Comanche band his scouts had located. As dusk approached, they created a low ridge overlooking a broad, sheltered valley. Sarah reined in her horse, scanning the landscape below. The valley appeared empty at first glance, but her eye caught a wisp of smoke, quickly dispersed by the wind, rising from a cluster of cottonwoods along a distant creek. "There," she whispered, pointing it out to Emma. "Someone's camped in those trees." "Is it Quanah's people?" Emma asked hopefully. "I don't know. We need to approach it carefully." They descended from the ridge, moving with deliberate caution. As they drew nearer to the cottonwood grove, Sarah began to make out signs of a temporary camp, not the full village of Quanah's band, but perhaps a smaller group. When they were within a quarter mile, a mounted figure suddenly materialized from the trees, riding toward them at a gallop. Sarah halted their horses, heart pounding. Had they found friends or enemies? The rider approached to within 50 yards before reining in sharply. In the fading light, Sarah recognized the distinctive silhouette of Grey Wolf. "Sarah Blackwood," he called, his voice carrying clearly across the distance between them. "Why you here?" Relief flooded through Sarah. "We've come to warn Quanah," she called back. "The soldiers are coming. They think they've found his camp near Palo Duro." Grey Wolf spurred his horse closer, suspicion evident in his posture. "You tell soldiers where to find us. Now you come here. Why trust you?" "Because we escaped the fort to bring this warning," Sarah replied earnestly. "The soldiers aren't coming here. They're attacking another band, thinking it's Quanah's. Innocent people will die because of what I told them." Grey Wolf studied them silently for a long moment. Then, apparently making a decision, he gestured for them to follow. "Come, Quanah will want to hear this." He led them into the cottonwood grove, where a small encampment had been established. Sarah counted 8 warriors and 3 women, a scouting party rather than the main band. Among them, to her surprise and Emma's delight, was Taquani. The boy's face lit up with undisguised joy at the sight of them, though he restrained himself from rushing forward, instead waiting for his father's permission. Quanah himself emerged. From the shadows of the trees, his expression guarded but curious. "The woman who walks between two worlds returns," he said by way of greeting. "With news of soldiers," Grey Wolf says. Sarah dismounted, helping Emma down after her. "Yes, they're preparing to attack a Comanche camp near Palo Duro Canyon, believing it to be yours." Interest flickered in Quanah's eyes. "Because you told them we went that way." "Yes," Sarah admitted, "as you instructed. But something's wrong. They claim to have found your camp exactly where I said it would be." Quanah exchanged glances with Grey Wolf. "Not possible. We came southwest as planned." "I know. That's why I had to warn you. They found someone else, another band. They'll attack believing it's you." A murmur ran through the assembled warriors as Grey Wolf translated her words. Quanah's expression darkened. "Yellow Bear's people," he said after a moment. "They summer near Palo Duro. Many children, few warriors." He addressed Sarah directly. "When will soldiers attack?" "They were preparing to march 3 days ago. A forced march could put them there by tomorrow." Quanah turned to his warriors, issuing rapid commands in Comanche. The camp exploded into activity, men rushing to ready, horses and weapons. "We ride to warn Yellow Bear," Quanah explained to Sarah. "Maybe not too late." "We'll come with you," Sarah said immediately. Quanah shook his head. "Too dangerous. You stay here with women. Rest." "No," Sarah insisted. "This is happening because of what I told the soldiers. I need to help make it right." Quanah studied her with new respect. "Brave woman. But what of your child?" Emma stepped forward before Sarah could answer. "I can ride as well as any Comanche child," she declared, with the confident exaggeration of youth. "Takwani taught me." A rare smile touched Quanah's lips. "So he did." He considered for a moment. "You both come, but stay with Takwani at the rear. If fighting starts, you run. Understand?" Sarah nodded, knowing this was the best compromise they'd receive. "We understand." They rode through the night, Quanah setting a punishing pace that tested even his hardened warriors. Sarah and Emma kept up, driven by the urgency of their mission and the knowledge that lives hung in the balance. Takwani rode beside them, occasionally signing encouragement when Emma began to droop with exhaustion. Dawn found them approaching the rugged formations that marked the entrance to Palo Duro Canyon. Quanah called a halt, sending scouts ahead to locate Yellow Bear's camp and any sign of the approaching soldiers. "They'll be coming from the east," Sarah told him, indicating the likely approach route Mackenzie would take based on what she'd overheard at the fort. Quanah nodded, dispatching additional scouts in that direction. While they waited for reports, he allowed the party a brief rest, their horses blowing hard from the night's exertion. Sarah accepted a water skin from one of the Comanche women, taking a small sip before passing it to Emma. "Do you think we'll reach them in time?" she asked Quanah. "If soldiers march on foot with wagons, yes. If only cavalry, harder to say." His expression was grim. "Yellow Bear is old, peaceful. His band trades with white settlements sometimes. They will not expect an attack." The scouts returned within the hour, bringing troubling news. Yellow Bear's camp had been located within the canyon, a large encampment of perhaps 50 teepees. But more urgently, dust clouds to the east suggested a large force approaching rapidly. "Mackenzie," Sarah confirmed after hearing the description. "Moving faster than we anticipated." Quanah issued swift orders. Half his warriors would ride directly to Yellow Bear's camp to organize an evacuation. The others, including Quanah himself, would attempt to delay the cavalry's advance. "What about us?" Sarah asked, dreading the answer, but knowing she couldn't. "Remain idle," Quanah considered. "You go to Yellow Bear, tell him white soldiers come, tell him Quanah Parker says run, not fight. He will believe white woman's warning." It was the right decision, Sarah knew. Her presence in the Comanche camp would lend credibility to the urgent warning. "We'll convince them," she promised. "Takwani goes with you," Quanah added. knows the way. With no time for extended farewells, they separated, Quanah and 3 warriors heading east to confront the soldiers, the rest of their party descending into the canyon toward Yellow Bear's unsuspecting camp. The route into Palo Duro was treacherous, especially on horseback. Switchback trails cut into near-vertical walls of striated red rock, dropping over 1,000 feet to the canyon floor. Takwani led them confidently, choosing paths that even experienced cavalry would find challenging to navigate quickly. "Soldiers will have to come this way too," Takwani explained as they picked their way down. "Father and others will make it harder." Sarah understood. Quanah wasn't attempting to defeat Mackenzie's forces. That would be suicide against trained cavalry with superior firepower. Instead, he was buying time, creating obstacles, forcing the column to slow its advance while Yellow Bear's people escaped. They reached the canyon floor by mid-morning, riding hard along the meandering stream that had carved this massive gash in the earth over countless millennia. Ahead, smoke from cook fires marked the location of Yellow Bear's camp. As they approached, warriors rode out to meet them, weapons ready. Takwani called out in Comanche, identifying himself as Quanah Parker's son. The warriors seemed skeptical, particularly about the white woman and child accompanying him. "We bring a warning," Sarah called in English, hoping someone would understand. "Soldiers coming, bluecoats, many soldiers." An older warrior with graying braids urged his pony forward. "I speak English," he said. "Who are you?" "Sarah Blackwood. This is my daughter, Emma." She pointed back toward the canyon rim. "Soldiers are coming, Colonel Mackenzie. They think this is Quanah Parker's band. They plan to attack." The warrior's weathered face showed alarm. "How do you know this?" "I was at Fort Richardson. I heard their plans. Quanah Parker sent us to warn you. He says, 'Run, don't fight. There are too many soldiers.'" The mention of Quanah's name seemed to carry weight. After a brief consultation with his companions, the warrior nodded. "Come, speak to Yellow Bear." They were escorted into a camp alive with normal morning activities, women cooking, children playing, men repairing weapons or tending horses. None seemed aware of the danger rapidly approaching. Yellow Bear proved to be an elderly man, his face deeply lined, his once powerful frame now thin with age. He received them in his teepee, listening intently as Sarah explained the situation. "Quanah Parker sent a warning," he confirmed when she had finished. "Why would he help old Yellow Bear? Our bands have not always been friends." "All Comanche in danger," Takwani answered before Sarah could respond. "Father says soldiers don't care which band they kill." The blunt assessment seemed to convince Yellow Bear where diplomacy might have failed. He rose with surprising agility for his age. "We break camp now." The warning spread through the encampment like wildfire. What had been a scene of domestic tranquility transformed into urgent activity as families dismantled teepees, packed belongings, and readied horses. Women worked with practiced efficiency, children helped where they could, and warriors prepared to defend the retreat if necessary. Sarah and Emma assisted an elderly woman whose family was already occupied with essential tasks. As they helped roll buffalo robes and dismantled the wooden frame of her teepee, Sarah kept anxious watch on the canyon rim, knowing Mackenzie's forces could appear at any moment. By noon, the evacuation was well underway. The first families were already moving deeper into the canyon, where a little-known trail would lead them to the safety of the Llano Estacado, the vast staked plains where cavalry would be reluctant to follow. Sarah was helping load a travois when the first shots echoed through the canyon. "They're here," she whispered, heart sinking. Takwani appeared at her side, his young face set in determined lines. "Father fights to slow them. We must hurry the people." The distant crack of rifles continued as they worked frantically to speed the evacuation. Most of the camp was now in motion, a stream of people, horses, and laden travois moving deeper into the canyon. But the elderly, the very young, and those burdened with heavy possessions moved slowly. A Comanche rider galloped into the camp, his horse lathered with exertion. He shouted information that sent a ripple of fear through those still. Preparing to depart, Sarah didn't need a translation to understand. The soldiers had broken through Quanah's delaying action and were descending into the canyon. "Takwani," she urged, "we need to get everyone moving faster." The boy nodded grimly. "You take Emma. Go with women and children. I stay. Help warriors protect retreat." "No," Emma cried, clutching at Takwani's arm. "You'll get hurt." A complex mixture of emotions crossed the boy's face: pride, fear, determination, and something softer as he looked at Emma. "Must help my people, like you helped by coming with warning." Emma released him reluctantly. "Be careful." Takwani turned to Sarah. "Yellow Bear shows you back way out of canyon. Follow him." Before Sarah could object, rifle fire erupted much closer, at the upper end of the camp. The soldiers had arrived. "Go!" Takwani urged, already turning his pony toward the sound of fighting. Sarah grabbed Emma's hand, pulling her toward the stream of people fleeing deeper into the canyon. Behind them, warriors were mounting a defense, buying precious minutes for their families to escape. As they ran, Sarah glimpsed blue uniforms on the ridge behind them, cavalry soldiers dismounting to fire into the camp. She saw Quanah's distinctive silhouette as he led a charge against one flank of the army line, drawing fire away from the escaping families. Yellow Bear appeared beside them, mounted on a sturdy pony. "This way," he directed, pointing toward a nearly invisible trail that ascended the canyon wall. "Women and children first." They joined the line of evacuees climbing the treacherous path. Sarah helped Emma navigate the steepest sections, all the while glancing back at the battle unfolding below. Mackenzie's forces had established a skirmish line, their disciplined volleys contrasting with the more mobile, hit-and-run tactics of the Comanche warriors. From their elevated position, Sarah could see that the defense was working. Over 3/4 of the camp's inhabitants were now on the escape route. But she could also see that the warriors, including Takwani and Quanah, were being gradually forced back by superior numbers and firepower. "Will they be able to follow us?" she asked Yellow Bear, who was helping an elderly couple ascend the trail. Duck. Old Chief's face was solemn. "Some, not all." The implication hit Sarah hard. Men were dying below so that others might live. A sacrifice she had set in motion with her warning, yet one that was saving far more lives than it cost. When they reached the canyon rim, Sarah turned for one last look at the battle. The scene below was chaos. Soldiers advancing through the half-dismantled camp, warriors making strategic retreats, smoke rising from tipis that had been set ablaze. In the midst of it all, she thought she could still make out Quanah's commanding figure, directing his fighters with remarkable calm. "Come," Yellow Bear urged. "Long journey ahead, many miles before safe." Sarah nodded, taking Emma's hand again. The girl was exhausted but moving with determination, her eyes occasionally straying back to the canyon they were leaving behind. "Will Takwani find us?" she asked softly. Sarah wished she could offer certainty. "He'll try, sweetheart. Quanah, too. They're very resourceful." They traveled through the remainder of the day and into the night, following Yellow Bear's lead across the high plains. The elderly chief pushed them relentlessly, knowing that pursuit was likely once Mackenzie realized most of the band had escaped. By dawn, they had joined other scattered groups of survivors, forming a ragged column heading toward a distant range of hills where, Yellow Bear explained, they would rendezvous with allied bands for protection. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah noticed riders approaching from behind. The column tensed, warriors moving to defensive positions, women urging children to hurry ahead. But as the riders drew nearer, shouts of recognition spread through the group. "Quanah!" someone called. "Quanah comes!" Sarah turned to see a group of perhaps 20 warriors approaching. their horses weary, but their postures unbowed. At their head rode Quanah Parker, his face streaked with the grime of battle, but his eyes alert as he scanned the column of refugees, and riding beside him, his young face split in a triumphant grin, was Takwani. Emma let out a cry of joy and broke from Sarah's grasp, running back along the trail toward the approaching riders. Sarah followed quickly, her own relief tempered by awareness of how many warriors were not returning. Quanah reined in his horse as they approached, inclining his head in greeting. "Sarah Blackwood, your warning saved many lives." "Not all," Sarah replied soberly, noting the significantly reduced number of warriors. "War always takes lives," Quanah acknowledged. "But without you, Yellow Bear's people would have been slaughtered in their sleep. Many women, children are alive because of your courage." Takwani had dismounted to receive Emma's enthusiastic hug. "We fought the Bluecoats," he told her proudly, "made them pay for each step." "Mackenzie will follow," Sarah predicted, thinking of the colonel's reputation for relentless pursuit. Quanah nodded. "For a time, but soon winter comes to the plains. Even Mackenzie must return to his fort before snow." "What happens then?" Sarah asked. "To your people? To Yellow Bear's band?" "We survive," Quanah said simply. "As we have always survived." He studied her face carefully. "But what of you, Sarah Blackwood? You cannot return to white settlements. Now, the Rangers will call you a traitor." It was a reality Sarah had been avoiding confronting directly. By warning the Comanche, she had made a final, irrevocable choice. There was no going back to their homestead, no returning to life among the settlers. "We'll find a new home," she said, more confidently than she felt. "Somewhere beyond the territories, perhaps California or Oregon." Quanah considered this, then shook his head slightly. "Long journey, dangerous for woman and child alone." He gestured to his warriors, to the refugee column stretching ahead of them. "You have another choice. Stay with us. Become people." The offer stunned Sarah. "Would you accept us permanently after everything?" "You saved my son," Quanah reminded her. "Now you have saved many more of our people. Some would call you an enemy because of your white skin, but actions speak louder than blood." He glanced at Emma, still chattering excitedly with Takwani. "And your daughter already has a Comanche heart." Sarah followed his gaze, seeing the easy companionship between the children, one fair-haired and blue-eyed, one dark and solemn, yet communicating with the unspoken understanding of true friends. "It won't be easy," she said, thinking aloud. "Learning all your ways, being accepted, nothing worth having comes easily," Quanah replied. "But you have already begun the journey. Why turn back now?" As the column resumed its march toward the distant hills, Sarah walked beside Quanah's horse, Emma and Takwani running ahead with the other children. The decision she faced wasn't simple. Embracing a new culture, leaving behind everything familiar, raising her daughter in a world very different from the one she had known. Yet, as she watched Emma's confident movements, heard her laughter mingling with Takwani's as they invented some new game, Sarah realized her daughter had already made the transition she herself still hesitated to embrace fully. "Long ago," Quanah said as they walked, "my mother faced a similar choice. Nadua, Cynthia Ann Parker, was taken from her white family as a child. She became Comanche in her heart. When the Rangers took her back to the white world, she never stopped longing to return to us." He met Sarah's eyes directly. "Your path is opposite, but the choice is the same. Where does your heart belong?" Sarah thought of their cabin near Clearwater Springs, of the life she and Thomas had built there. She thought of the suspicious glances from settlers after she had helped Takwani, the threatening presence of Johnson, the narrow definitions of loyalty and belonging that had ultimately forced them to flee. Then she looked ahead at the Comanche column, at the people who had taken in two strangers, taught them their ways, and now offered them a permanent place despite the risks. Imperfect, People, to be sure, with their own prejudices and limitations, but people who had shown her another way of understanding family, community, and belonging. "My heart," Sarah said finally, "is with my daughter, and her heart seems to have found its home already." Quanah nodded, a rare smile softening his stern features. "Then you are welcome among the people, Sarah Blackwood. Your story will be told in our lodges for generations to come. How a mother's compassion for a wounded boy changed the course of many lives." As they continued their journey across the vast plains, Sarah felt a sense of peace gradually replacing her uncertainty. The path ahead would not be easy, but it would be chosen, not forced upon them. And in that choice lay a freedom she had never quite known before. Emma ran back to her side, cheeks flushed with exertion and happiness. "Takwani says we're going to winter in a hidden valley where the soldiers can't find us, and in the spring we'll follow the buffalo herds north." "Is that what you want?" Sarah asked, studying her daughter's face. "To stay with Quanah's people? It would mean not going back to our old life." Emma's expression grew serious. "I miss our cabin sometimes, but here no one looks at us like we did something wrong by helping Takwani." She took her mother's hand. "And you smile more with the people, Mama, I noticed." "From the mouths of babes," Sarah thought, squeezing Emma's hand. "Then we'll stay, at least for now. We'll learn their ways and share our own. Maybe someday we'll help others understand that the distance between our worlds isn't as vast as they believe." Ahead of them, the plains stretched endlessly beneath an infinite sky, and beyond the horizon lay a future neither of them could fully imagine. But they would face it together, carrying with them the lesson that had begun this journey, that compassion, extended across the boundaries of fear and prejudice, could transform not just individual lives, but the very fabric of understanding. Between peoples long divided by hatred and violence, it had started with a wounded boy and a woman who couldn't turn away. It would continue with 1,000 small choices day by day to build bridges rather than walls, to see the humanity in those called enemy, and to find family in unexpected places. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Sarah reached into her pocket and felt the smooth contours of the eagle pendant Quanah had returned to her. Once a symbol of protection, it now represented something more: belonging. She had saved a Comanche boy's life, and in doing so had found a new life for herself and her daughter, one that defied the rigid boundaries of the world they had left behind. The horizon beckoned, and together they walked toward it, no longer caught between two worlds, but helping to create a new one with each step. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.